Welcome to All Terrain Marriages. We're Danny and Stephanie Gutierrez, and we're here to guide you through a series of conversations on marriage that we've specifically designed for missionaries. And we say conversation on purpose, and it's because we hope that as you engage these next 8 weeks, that you'll begin finding yourselves having some fresh conversations about your marriage with your spouse. See, we believe that it's in those conversations that the most significant learning about your marriage is going to happen. So we want to start by saying, good for you. We know it's not easy to find times like this, especially when you're in ministry, and especially when that ministry has you serving as a missionary. So we're glad to see that you've taken the time to do this today. Now, whether you're doing it together as a couple, or as a ministry team, or perhaps as a small group of missionary couples, we recognize that if there is a segment of couples that deserve to be called all-terrain, it's you.
And as missionaries who served abroad for 10 years in Lima, Peru, and who now continue serving in the mission space while based in the U.S., we get it. We know what it's like to do marriage as missionaries. The unique challenges we face, the strain it puts on your marriage, but also the incredible opportunities doing ministry together gives us to get to serve together and bond, and I think grow in ways that other couples could not even fathom. And despite all this crazy, I'd choose this life again. But I think choose is the key word here. You don't want to fall into marriage on accident, missions on accident, or a missionary marriage on accident. For this to work, even if you did fall into it on accident, hey, it's time to start doing your missionary marriage on purpose. So we all know there's a ton out there on marriage, but maybe you can relate. So many times Danny and I have gone to a marriage conference or picked up a marriage book, and the examples given didn't quite connect with us. Amazing content, but the application part was tricky because the suggestions, the ideas, the stories, they so often came with this underlying assumption that the couples listening were all in a city somewhere in the US or UK or Canada, and they'd say things like, "A nice thing you can do for your wife is to fill the tank of her car with gas." Okay, for the first bit of time that we lived in Peru, we didn't have a car, and we never had more than one. And so maybe a better suggestion for Danny back then would have been, how about you use your Spanish, which is better than hers, to help her grab a street taxi and make sure the guy driving doesn't overcharge her or have shady vibes. Okay, and although it's not hard to understand the point some of these prepackaged prescriptions are attempting to make, it still just feels like a piece of clothing that doesn't fit quite right because, well, we're not there where all that common sense makes sense. We're here in a different place while learning a new culture and adapting to a new normal with a different set of common sense where very few of those prescriptions would even work well. So we ask ourselves, could there be a way of looking at marriage uniquely through the eyes of a missionary couple? And we believe so.
You know, when you think about it for a second, Stephanie, there's got to be a reason why the term missionary position was even coined. Now, right? We're all married here, we're all missionaries, so let's not be weird about it. But the fact is that we figured out, someone along the way, there's this rich legacy of people figuring out love and intimacy in this context. So let's lean in. Let's recognize that our marriages give us this great opportunity and a wide open door to connect with the communities God has sent us to serve when our marriages are flourishing, when they're real, when they're vibrant, when they're different.
You know, I love that Jesus, when he sent his disciples out, he did it 2 by 2.
That's right.
If the world was going to know that they were his disciples by their love, then the fact that there were 2 of them gave the people this built-in object lesson and example so people could see all that was different about this radical new way of living. And hey, Jesus picks the pairs. I don't know how happy his disciples were about who he stuck them with, but praise God, I feel like I won the disciple lottery. I'm sure glad that the person I got sent off with to live on mission is this guy. We maybe have not felt that way every single day of our lives, but we know it to be true. Hey, I like you, by the way.
I like you too.
I think we all recognize that it is an honor to be called to the nations. And it really is a blessing to be called together, to get to go as a couple. But it's not always easy, is it? And maybe some of you do not feel that you won the 2x2 disciple lottery. If you don't, do not pinch your spouse right now. Also, we believe that God knows just what he's doing. He could do a work in your marriage, and we're really glad you're here. But we know that every couple, missionary or not, has their challenges, no doubt. But as missionaries, sometimes it feels like it gets compounded when we get to juggle some of those same challenges everybody else does, while navigating new terrain, on a different soil, in a culture we weren't born into.
Well, that's one of the reasons that we're calling this series All-Terrain Marriages. Because just like those well-built ATVs, those vehicles that can make their way through anything, through the mud and over sand, over rocks, or through snow and sleet, and all the different places where those well-built sedans that are built for well-paved roads could never make it. See, we believe that God, when we allow him to do something in our marriages, he can make our marriages able to do the same. And so what we want to do in the course of these next 8 weeks is we want to take a look at 4 words. And we're going to take 2 sessions to talk about each one of these words. And we're hoping that these words help us become those 4x4 couples who can traverse any terrain we find in front of us. So the words that we're going to be looking at together are location,
lubrication,
navigation,
and narrative. And to begin unpacking this first word, location, we want to draw our attention to this story found in the Bible, in the book of Genesis, where God first calls Moses to leave where he was at the time, to go and accomplish a rescue mission. And I'm sure all of us are familiar with the story of the burning bush, that supernatural encounter Moses has with God through this bush that's caught on fire by flames that don't consume it. Not only is this an unbelievable sight, but from it, Moses hears the very voice of God calling him and giving him instructions. Let's read it together. It's in Exodus 3, 4-5. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, "Moses, Moses!" And Moses said, "Here I am." "Do not come any closer," God said. "Take off your sandals, for the place where you're standing is holy ground."
Now we recognize this story doesn't come from the book of Song of Solomon, or it's a story that gets brought up much in marriage teachings or marriage conferences, but we believe it's a great place for us to start this conversation. Because one, I have so many questions when I hear this story. The dialogue part in particular. It makes me wonder why. Why does God ask him to stop and not come any closer when he just got done calling him? Doesn't God want us to come near him when we hear him calling for us? And why does he ask him to take off his sandals? Why not something like comb your hair or brush your teeth, or in the very least, clean out your ears because I want to tell you something, or bow reverently as you approach this moment? No, we see him giving him instructions that stop him dead in his tracks. And we believe it's precisely because this is such an intimate moment between God and Moses. God wants to make sure that Moses doesn't take one more step without recognizing the terrain that he's on, where he finds himself in that moment. Where he is standing is so important to God that Moses recognized that he stops him in his tracks. Stephanie, how many times with our girls when they were young have we walked into their room in the dead of night when everything is dark and we've stepped on a Lego or one of those Polly Pocket doll accessories or a little pet shop pet? I mean, I don't know if you've done this before, if you've walked into a room and stepped on a Lego. If you haven't, thank God for that every day. Every day that you do not step on a Lego is a good day. See, the fact is that we walk differently when we're barefoot. I mean, don't you? I mean, I know I do, because I know what it's like to step into something that's muddy or slippery or stinky or sharp. See, when we're barefoot, we simply walk more intentionally. We pay closer attention to the terrain that's under our feet. We're more intentional about each step that we're taking. We know that it's going to take a totally different approach, a totally different strategy if we're walking on something that's cold or hot or slippery or muddy. And perhaps that is what God is getting at here in this intimate moment with Moses. Like he's saying, Moses, I need you to pay attention to where you're standing. This is holy ground. You're standing on holy ground. I need you to pay attention and be very intentional about the very next steps you're about to take.
Yeah. So let's try something together. Take out your notebook or a sheet of paper right now. Go ahead and grab it. And we're going to show on your screen some images of different landscapes and terrain. So if you had to choose one of them to describe where you feel you as a couple are standing right now, figuratively, not literally, which would it be? Where do you feel your life is located right now in terms of terrain? And don't consult your spouse on this one. Answer it about the two of you, but answer it individually. And you can talk about it later. So don't ask your spouse what they're choosing, no peeking. And if you don't see an image that you fully identify with as you're looking at them, just take a second to write down what you feel that terrain would be. And along with writing down what terrain you choose, write down a few words that would describe some emotions you feel about that terrain. How do you feel about the terrain you choose? And pause the video and take a few minutes to write down your thoughts, but don't share them yet. Great job. So what was the point of that exercise? Well, you just chose a terrain, right? Well, another simpler word for a piece of terrain could be ground. I think we all could agree that our marriages are holy ground.
Yeah.
This place where we draw near to one another is a place where intentionality is everything. So, good starting point for all of us. What you just did in this exercise and what we're going to build on was essentially taking off your sandals. It was recognizing what kind of ground you're standing on right now. What kind of ground your marriage is standing on. You know, all the earth that God has made is holy. So where you're standing is holy. So where are you standing? We have to open our eyes and see it. We've got to turn off the autopilot in our marriage. We have to take off the mundane, take off the assumptions, take off all the things that we're taking for granted and just set aside the medicators, which is whatever that you do or consume to help dial down your sensitivity to where you're at in life right now. So by taking off those insulators, by setting aside the medicators, it's going to allow us to more accurately check in with where we find ourselves right now. And Danny, like you said, taking off our sandals causes us to slow down and recognize exactly where it is we find ourselves. So where are we standing right now? Are we standing in some of our best days? Or are we standing in some of our most challenging days? Are we walking on an unambiguous path where we can see clear purpose? Or are we walking down a winding dirt road and struggling with uncertainty? Are we trailblazing a path we've never walked before with this sense of wonder and excitement, maybe some nervousness? Or maybe we're lost in the desert, devastated because what we thought was an oasis turned out to be yet another mirage. Stopping to recognize the terrain we're on is powerful because it gives us the opportunity to really make decisions, I think, and make adjustments, whatever adjustments we need to do to best support one another and to work well as a married team.
So many times in the marriage space, it feels like the conversation jumps straight into where we're at as a couple. And sometimes that's hard to figure out because we haven't first taken the time to slow down and to ask ourselves where it is that we're at personally and how that's affecting who I am bringing to my marriage today. See, it's entirely possible that one of you personally feels like the current terrain of your life is an open field. It's ripe with opportunities and harvest, while the other feels more like you're walking through a swamp. I mean, one of you may be feeling like you're having this mountaintop experience where everything is working in your life, everything is great and beautiful, while the other is feeling like you're walking through a dry desert, where obedience to his call is like your daily decision. You see, what we're suggesting is that it's worth having a conversation about that, where we get curious about where we're at while not assuming where our spouse is at, so we can better understand where we find ourselves together. Mm-hmm. You know, there have been times in our relationships where we felt kind of distant. Mm-hmm. You know, we felt kind of like ships crossing in the night, even though we lived underneath the same roof. Moments where we felt like, hey, where are you at? Like, we're on a date night, but you're obviously somewhere else. And I know that can be frustrating at times, wondering if you know, are we drifting? Are things cooling off? Or am I just not being heard or understood? And in part, that's because we haven't taken the time to figure out, where am I at, before I start wondering, where are they at, so that we can understand, where are we at?
Yeah. So let's start here. Getting curious, asking each other a few questions, with zero assumptions or judgment, so that we know really what our starting point is. Because how can we know what direction we're headed in if we're not aware of our starting point? So now's the moment for you to show the terrain you chose to your spouse. So for those of you doing this in a small group, you're going to do this in a slightly different way. But we've put together a simple discussion guide that will help you get started. And you'll find instructions and questions there. And our hope, of course, is that you slow down.
Yeah.
Take off your sandals, recognize the holy ground you're standing on, and take the time to connect through conversation. So don't rush it, just lean in, stay open, be curious instead of defensive, be honest, and be kind to each other. And let's decide that this journey is worth taking together. And we'll see you back next time for session 2 of All Trained Marriages.